The last of the Muslim gunpowder empires that we're going to look at is the Mughal Empire. And the Mughal Empire is going to come to control a good portion of India. And the term Mughal is just the Persian word for Mongol. And that comes from their founder, Babur. Babur founded the Mughal dynasty in India, but claimed to be a direct descendant of both Genghis Khan on one side and the Mongols, and Tamerlane, the last of the great Turkish conquerors, on the other side. And his original goal was to rebuild the old, strong Central Asian empires like the Mongols had built. And so that was his real goal, was to conquer Central Asia, and really didn't show a lot of interest in India except for the wealth that was there. And so his original plan was to use the wealth of India to launch campaigns into Central Asia, which he did. He's going to come to conquer most of northern India and then begins to invade Central Asia. However, he's unable to have much success in Central Asia. And so at the time of his death, he basically controlled just northern India. And that's where the Mughal Empire starts. In a lot of ways, the high point, especially the early Mughal Empire, is going to come under Akbar. Akbar was a great conqueror and would continue to expand the empire into central and even the southern parts of India. He was a great administrator. He creates a strong centralized government, builds a very elaborate bureaucracy to oversee his territory. As he expanded, he also, as a side note, loved to use war elephants. In fact, created the first armor for elephants where they were protected. He even affixed knives to the end of their tusks so they could be used better in battle, and even used war elephants to execute people. And so he conquers a good portion of India. And then once conquering this territory, he really focused on trying to build unity in India and wanted to try to create a syncretic religion that all of the people would embrace. Because one of the problems the Mughal empires had was they were a Muslim empire ruling a mostly Hindu population. And so Akbar actually held religious debates similar to the old Mongol Khans, where he would invite religious officials in and they would debate theological issues. And through this studying, he develops his divine faith. It was technically called the Din-e-Ilahi. And it combined aspects of both Islam and Hinduism and some of the other faiths in India as well. And his goal was to try to unite the subcontinent under this new religion. Now, in actuality, not many people really converted to it, but it does show his commitment to trying to create a strong, unified empire in India. He's also going to actually improve some rights for women. He gets rid of the old practice of the sati. And so the practice of the sati was that when a woman's husband died, she was in some cases expected to throw herself on top of the funeral pyre, the fire that her husband's body was being burned on. And not a ton of women practice the sati, but especially if your husband was a prominent figure, you were expected to go through with the sati. And there's stories of women being forced to undergo the sati or pressured by the husband's family to undergo this sati. And so ultimately, he's going to outlaw that practice and does some other minor things to help improve women's status as well. For example, tries to end some of the seclusion of women as well. Following Akbar, we get to Aurangzeb. And Aurangzeb's reign is kind of bipolar. On one side, on one hand, it was the high point of the empire. He spent most of his time conquering and bringing most of India under his control. But on the other hand, he also began to persecute Hindus in India during this time. And so he did expand the empire to include most of the Indian subcontinent. But he also spent basically 50 years conquering. And this led to constant fighting during his reign. It also put a huge strain on the treasury. It cost a ton of money to fight these ongoing wars and battles, and also caused animosity as well. And then when it comes to tolerance, Akbar, who had been known for his religious tolerance, Aurangzeb reverses that. Aurangzeb was committed to trying to purify Islam in India. And so he raises taxes on the Hindu population. He destroys Hindu temples, and that creates a lot of animosity amongst the Hindu population, which dominated India. And so his reign is kind of hard to say it was kind of the high point of the empire, because it also was kind of the beginnings of the decline of the Mughal Empire as well. Another growing problem with the Mughal Empire was the arrival of the Europeans. And as the Mughal Empire begins to decline, Europeans are going to play a bigger and bigger role in India's affairs. But even during the high point of the Mughal Empire, they were content to allow the Europeans to come to control a lot of the long distance trade out of India. The Mughals controlled internal trade, but they allowed the Europeans to control most of their outside trade.